It is the 22nd of December, and this day in Baptist history, our reading is Transferring Leadership. Our verse of Scripture comes from 2 Kings chapter 2 and verse 15. And when the sons of the prophets, which were to view at Jericho, saw him, they said, The spirit of Elijah doth rest on Elisha. And they came to meet him, and bowed themselves to the ground before him. On August 9th, 1839, the 51st birthday of Adoniram Judson, another potential missionary was born in Carleton County, Ontario, Canada. The infant was John McLaurin, who in his adulthood would serve the Lord in India. Being raised in a warm Christian family, John McLaurin was converted in his youth, and before his 15th birthday declared his faith in the waters of baptism. At age 22, John entered the Woodstock Institute in Canada and completed his full literary and theological training there. In 1868, he became pastor of the Baptist Church in Stratford and was ordained on July 24 of that year. Almost immediately, the young pastor presented himself as a missionary candidate to the Auxiliary Baptist Foreign Mission Society of Ontario, which at that time worked in conjunction with the American Baptist Missionary Union. Reverend McLaurin was accepted in 1869 and was assigned to work among the Tologos. Simultaneously, the Lord had been preparing a missionary partner to join Reverend McLaurin. Mary Bates was born in Banbridge, Ireland in November of 1846. She was the second daughter of Reverend and Mrs. John Bates. The family emigrated to the United States in 1850, and Mary was reared in a godly environment. It was at the Woodstock Institute that John and Mary met, and following John's application for missionary service, the two were married on October 12, 1869. Reverend and Mrs. John McLaurin sailed for India from New York on December 22, 1869. After learning the Telugu language and becoming adjusted to the culture, the McLaurins were assigned to work at Ongole with the Reverend John E. Clow. Reverend Clow's health had been declining, and it was thought wise to introduce a vibrant young missionary couple who could step into the leadership role that had been so wisely administered by the veteran missionary. John McLaurin was surely a good choice. He had physical stamina that equipped him for the difficult tasks. One report states that, and I quote, Mr. McLaurin traveled over 1,000 miles in the jungles, having made 5 trips of over 20 days each. A large part of the time was spent in the villages where the widely scattered members of the Ongole Church reside, end of quote. The next year's report was just as impressive, and I quote, The vast amount of work on the field rendered your missionary imperative at Ongole. He, however, managed during the year to make 6 tours into the jungles, which occupied considerably over 100 days. At the annual meeting in Ramapatam, Ramapatam, he had already baptized 690 rejoicing converts, end of quote. Reverend McLaurin also revealed a tenacious but tender spirit that would command a faithful following. The problem was the age-old dilemma of the changing of leadership. We rejoice in the great wisdom that was used at that time. John Clow took 3 lengthy preaching tours during 1871 through the area, and John McLaurin traveled by his side. By the end of the year, the Ongole Church numbered 1,658. After 7 years of incessant labor, the Clow family returned to the United States for much-needed recuperation and rest. The question was how the Nationals would respond to the McLaurins. Though it was acknowledged that the McLaurins were quality people, the spirit of dissatisfaction was manifest even before Mr. Clow left Ongole. Tragically, no sooner had he gone than a spirit of rebellion broke out. It was the great desecration, firmness, patience, and kindness of Reverend McLaurin that saved the day. With the unrest in Ongole, a panic had seized the believers at Kumbum, a mission station quite isolated from Ongole. A violent type of fever had broken out, and the heathen declared that the Christians were the cause of it. The gods were angry because Christians had forsaken the worship of the gods, and this fever was a punishment. The custom was that a great sacrifice had to be made to appease the anger of the gods, and the believers were pressured to participate. Some did, while others had held firmly to Bible convictions. Mr. McLaurin dealt wisely with the issue. A number of boys from Cumbum were at the school in Ongole. They were given medicine and instructed as to how the medications were to be administered. The boys were then dispatched home to Cumbum to care for sick relatives and friends. The fever abated, and a double blessing ensued. Believers in Cumbum who had been wavering were strengthened, and believers at Ongole had their minds diverted from their complaining spirit. Before the year was over, all the trouble was ended, and the Nationals rallied around the McLaurins just as they had around the Clowes. During the 2 years of Reverend McLaurin's ministry in Ongole, he baptized 1,185 converts, and the work was at an all-time high. Upon Reverend Clowes' return, the work, having so greatly prospered, was returned to him, and the McLaurins proceeded to Canada to organize the new Telego mission for the recently formed Canadian Baptists. The continued success of Reverend McLaurin's ministry is to be seen for the next 12 years of labor in Canada. To God be the glory.